Welcome back, everybody, to episode 2 of Fly on the Wall podcast. It's your hosts, Aaron and Phil. We got some special guests with us, some longtime friends, Cameron and Sam, one of my favorite married couples. Guys, tell us a little about yourself.
Jeez, I feel like that's a big. I actually listened to part of y'all's last episode, and I remember you asking Phil to introduce himself, and he was literally like, "That's a big question."
And he hasn't learned. He's not learned.
Yeah, I'm having the same problem.
I didn't prep you for it either. My fault.
You didn't. I don't know what we're talking about. So,
all right, tell us this. Let me help you out. Yeah, tell us relationally how you're on this recording right now, and why you're on the recording. I guess those are both one and the same.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Relationally, knowing Phil for like what? It's been like a year now, right?
A year.
And then Aaron, yeah. I know I've known Aaron for 14?
No, that's older than that, G. It's got to be like 18
plus years. 14 plus years. I know Cameron's known him for what? Around
8? Well, Aaron and I have a very special past, but we have been friends for like 8 years.
It was beef for a while.
No, it wasn't beef. Cameron bullied
Aaron.
It
was really all Aaron. That's the crazy part.
That's all right. We're not here to air out the past. All right, we all good today. Okay, amen.
You talking about amen?
All right. So, not gonna leave the audience hanging because I know last time Phil mentioned a concept that he was really excited to share, but he didn't want to share that day. So, Phil, I'm just going ahead and throw it off to you. Go ahead. What are we talking about today?
You like throwing people on the spot. But today what we're talking about is I don't really know how to identify the concept itself. It's portrayed in Parenthood. When we started talking, we had a conversation about fatherhood, and ultimately of all the things in this world and of all the concepts to exist, the transcendental being that is God is analogously represented by fatherhood. You know what I mean? So that's like that raises a question mark to me. So like, why is God considered our father, and what does it mean to be a father? I feel like that probably is the most important thing. Not a father specifically, but just like a parent. And then also discipleship. So if God were to come to earth, what would he do? Well, he did. He got together 12 guys and discipled them. So that's another example of how this is like a very imperative thing. And then there is what's the other example we brought up, Aaron?
I don't know. Wasn't it like royal families and like kings and stuff?
Secession, like monarchs, I guess. Yeah, secession.
That's a good umbrella term, honestly, just for all of it. Just secession.
Secession. Yeah. Okay, that is right. That was the original phrasing too. So.
Right.
I guess. Yeah.
But that whole concept of secession and the imperative that it's given, right? Like not just but just like in terms of what we were noticing was on fundamental levels throughout the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
We really started to see, oh, okay, this is a big concept that we still are trying to digest.
Yeah.
You brought up fatherhood and what was it, discipleship? What made you say discipleship on that?
Is because discipleship is not of the same nature as parenthood, but it does have like a kindred spirit to it, if that makes sense. Like walking with someone in life and like teaching them different things. And what really brought this the origin of this thought experiment, because like we'll have thoughts and then like put a pin in it, and then if something else introduces, it's like, okay, let me explore this thought again. So whenever the last year when everything hit the fan, and and I'm sure this has happened to you a bunch last year, but everybody and their mama was coming to me, and like anyone who wasn't black was coming to me and be like, what's the best thing we can do right now? Like, how can we support blah 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 blah? And like they kept asking me that thing, and I'm like, I'm 21, like I'm you know what I'm saying? Like I ain't got all the answers, but I will try and answer like I do. So I thought about that thing, and I said, I think the biggest thing that could help in terms of racial reconciliation, or any kind of reconciliation on a national scale or global scale, is just raising your kids. Like if I think about the baby boomer generation that like when everybody came back from war and had a bunch of kids, the baby boomer generation altered the course of our nation. Like they made an impact. This is one generation of people. One generation. So imagine if everybody in one generation of people were to raise their kids or like raise up the next generation with these ideas. It's like starting a Microsoft Word sheet and then just not saving it. Do you know what I mean? So it's like you work so hard, you type up 1,000 characters, and then you close the window and it's just gone forever. Yeah. So just save your work.
Save your work, yeah.
Save your work.
That's crazy, man. And then, okay, now that you bring that up, like that's bringing up to me, well, just even just the thought of that Microsoft Word concept, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like talking about a book, a continuous book that's still being written. And it's like, man, why does every generation have to keep rewriting the same chapter
Mm-hmm.
when you really should be expounding upon the work that was done before? So like that even brings into mind like generational curses, stuff like that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where generations keep walking the same circles that the last one's on, instead of like getting a double portion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's interesting, man.
Yeah.
I'm gonna digest that more.
Instead of spending 40 years in the wilderness, we can get where we going.
Wow. Wow. Hold on. Even because that really was the whole point of even like the reason why the Torah was written.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we're doing the Bible in 1 year plan or whatever, and right now we just finished Joshua, I believe. And like even if you go, you know, you're talking about like Moses having encounters with God and like writing down the first 5 books of the Bible. And he spends the whole book of Deuteronomy just reminding the people, like, look, before we go into this land, let me just remind you of how trash y'all's parents were. Okay. Like they were and it sounded like, I'm not gonna just a little tangent. It sounded like Moses got a little beef with the people. Like he never really got over.
Of course he does.
I mean, that's
Of course
fair.
he does.
It's fair. I didn't realize it though. I thought Moses was just happy to be serving him, but I'm reading it. And he's like, bro, let me just write a whole book about how I hate y'all's guts. That's what I got from it. But he just wanted to remind him. He was like, look, you can't take what your parents gave you into this new land. You have to start anew. And then you have to constantly remind, I'm writing these books down for you. You have to constantly remember the instruction that the Lord gave you when you were in the wilderness, because just like he is blessing you with this land, he will equally curse you in the land if you do not follow it. So, I mean, this is a crossroads for the people of Israel. It's like, choose the God today whom you're going to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And again, following in line with secession, how are they going to raise their kids? Just like Joshua says, he's like, look, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a statement I made earlier when we were in the Bible study, and that's how we met, Sam and Cam, through the Bible study like a year ago. Whenever I was stuck back at the house and needed some community, y'all looked out for me. I appreciate y'all. But earlier today, I was talking. I said a thing about parenthood. It was a part of this same development, like of this same thought, and it was like essentially the whole job of a parent is like to craft like a lens for their child through which to view the world. So it's like a lot of our moral compass comes from our parents, like right and wrong, and like just the way we interpret things that we see. And it's like, for instance, like in America, we have everybody growing up in the same country, and seemingly there's been like a polarization to where there's a bunch of different sides of America, but that view America and see different things when they look at it. And that comes from, you're raising, your upbringing. And I was like, yeah, like a parent's job is to give their kids like a lens through which to view the world. Like as I'm living life now and I'm seeing a bunch of different things, I'm realizing, okay, and this is something also I have to check myself on. Like the way I view it is in accordance with how I was raised. And there's also times where it's like, okay, let me view this from like multiple perspectives, or let me view this from different perspectives. But that's also symptomatic of how I was raised, is to view things from different perspectives. And a lot of people, like I have a lot of friends, and it's like they'll say something. I'm like, bro, that's just your dad talking. Like that's just your parents talking. Like you sound, you know what I'm saying? Like this isn't an original idea. And that's like the whole point, I guess, is to teach your kids, like, okay, life is this big, crazy world. There's like a lot of gravity to it. There's a lot of depth to this world. And if you go in there all kinds of any way, you're going to get chewed up and spat out. So let me prepare you for this.
Yeah, that reminds me of Proverbs 22:6, where it's talking about, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. But let's be real though, because I mean, I think we're all fortunate to have parents who are believers and stuff. But even still, I'm sure there's different areas where just being a parent, I mean, and having that responsibility as a person, as a flawed person, like there are times when your parents are gonna like just fail you. Like it just comes with the job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, it's yeah. There's some experience in life, some path that your parents just were not able to prepare you for. There's something that they did that no parent is perfect in a job. So that for me, as I've been meditating on this, is like that's again going back to like God as the Father, right? Being
Mm-hmm.
that figure throughout life, preparing us, because He knows He has more knowledge of where we're gonna go, not just where others have gone, but like where He's taking us, and He's like kind of leading us to navigate the water. And that I think that's one reason why people would feel comfortable calling God a father type figure. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay. Just making sure.
I have go ahead.
I was gonna say, I feel like, and this is my opinion, I guess. I think we talked about this a little bit. Parents, maybe this is controversial, don't know how to parent, and that sounds weird, but I think a lot of parents see parenting as ruling instead of training, preparing. Excuse me. Like when we look at God and how He parents, He's not enforcing Himself on us. He's letting us know right from wrong, and if we do something wrong, He's like letting us know and punishing. But it's not like He's do what I say or else. It's not like He's instilling like fear. Okay, if you don't do this, this is gonna happen. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like it's easier sometimes to go to God, which makes sense because the way He parents isn't enforcing, if that makes sense. It's not like He's forcing you to do anything. He's more just like you know what's up. He's talking to you. He's loving you, and the love that He shows isn't one that's it's not one that feels forceful. If that makes sense.
Right. But He will come for that tail.
He will.
That tail.
He will. But I think it's such a fine line between like discipline and like
consequence for actions. Yeah. Sam, I have a question for you, and Cam, this applies to you too, and I'm gonna ask Aaron in a bit. It's for everybody. Do you recall like it could be parents, could be like not parents, just a significant figure that like discipled you? And man, crying my ear going crazy in Charleston. Driving by the house. A question for you, Sam and Cam, and Aaron. I guess you'll go third, but we've spoken enough here. Is there like a significant figure, and it could be a parent or figure, but if you do give a parent, I would also like to hear someone else in life, but that like kind of discipled you or mentored you, and it was significant in like the trajectory of your life. They look at you at the same time.
I mean, the thing for me, when I think of someone who's had a significant impact on the trajectory of my life, like more intimately, that is my mother. And not just because like she raised me and we was in the house together, but also because she was intentional about the things that she taught us and the things that she instilled in us. And I really don't know if I can name another like mentor figure that had a significant trajectory on my life, because I really, and the extent to which I expand my circle is a different conversation. Mm-hmm. But the point is, it's not that large, and so it's been pretty small for my entire for pretty much my entire life. And so, of course, there are like backstory. I'm in law school, not to become a lawyer. I'm getting a master's. I'm a Juris Master at Emory. But one of the classes I'm taking is called criminal law, and part of what you need to consider when like defending or prosecuting a case is the issue of causation. And there's this thing called like an intervening cause. And so that's all backend information to inform what I'm about to say, which is that there are other mentors or adults, maybe even peers, I guess, who along the way may have been kind of like intervening forces in my trajectory, but not because it had a significant impact per se. Like, I think the person who actually could have granted, like, praise God for his like favor and grace and mercy. And so at the end of the day, like, I could be a child regardless. But if my mother was not who she was, and if she was not intentional about what she did, and what she showed us, like my life would have been drastically different, even as far as like character development. Like even if like the outward circumstances of my life were the same, the way I view the world and the way I view God and all of these kinds of things were heavily influenced by what my mother was intentional about teaching us and showing us, and her being an example like herself for these things. Whereas other people, maybe I learn like head knowledge from, but that character development and that heart transformation, I can't really pinpoint to another human being other than my mother. I guess and Sam now, but yeah.
For me, it's been different people for different seasons. Um, so outside of parents, I would say my brothers because they're 10 and 13 years older than me. So whenever I clash with my parents, whatever the case is, they would be like the kind of middle ground where they could help me see their point of view slash they could also see my point of view. And so they had that kind of like younger mindset in my parents. And so whatever they said, I was able to relate with more because they're closer to my age. But they're also old enough to where it was like they could see further than I could, right? But also in the same realm, Aaron, right? We grew up together, and so being a Christian, right, especially a young one, and growing up the way we did, it's uncommon, right? And so it's a lot easier to not feel like you can be yourself because people will judge you. But when you have someone that you're going through it with who has the same like morals and values and stuff, who's going from the same church, it becomes easier. So having someone like Aaron for the past 14 plus years to where we're both trying to improve each other, trying to sharpen each other like iron sharpens iron, made it so much easier for me to walk in my walk with God because there's someone else around my age who was doing it, right? And then more recently, over the past 5 years, being with Cameron, that's challenged me in a way in which, compared to Aaron and my brothers, where I was more growing up and developing my walk with Christ, Cameron's been okay, cool. Now that you have a foundation, let's build on that foundation. Let's build the house. Now you have the foundation, everything's laid down. Let's make it something beautiful, right? It's challenged me in ways in which I didn't see or expect, but ways in which I need to be challenged. And I'm sorry, ways in which I need to be challenged so that I can be the person that God's called me to be, right? So hopefully that made sense, but those serve people in different seasons.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have another question, or can I go on a tangent?
Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, I think thinking about our responses and even reflecting on Phil and Aaron, what y'all have been talking about, with like the idea of secession, I just think about the command. Command's like a strong word. Like it is a command, but also I think it might have like I think it can be viewed as like a gift as well. But for us to be fruitful and multiply, I think that concept plays a lot into the idea of secession. Even the idea, Phil, of what you were saying, where like oftentimes you'll come across people and like their perspectives or the way they talk is like literally what they've been taught. Like it's literally like you see like their parents and what they're representing. Like that general idea of you kind of mimicking what you've been taught, I think is a consistent thing. And I think even in the idea of multiplying in that like be fruitful and multiply kind of command, multiplication isn't just production, but it's the production of image bearers, if you will. Like if something multiplies, the thing that it multiplied into looks like the original in some capacity. And so when you're talking about discipleship, when you're talking about parenthood, all of these kinds of things, you're you're really instilling perspectives and you're instilling worldviews and you're instilling values. And to me, the question that that brings up is, which I guess is the inherent question to this entire conversation, which is what like y'all have been talking about. But like, what is it about? What is it about God's will, or what's it about God's nature, that makes the idea of not just like secession in the sense of producing things that follow, but producing like things that follow, that makes that so important? I think that's what I'm really thinking about. And it makes sense when I like think about the when I think about the command to like spread the good news, right? Like it's kind of that idea of like infectiousness, if that makes sense. and people like adopting new identities and us becoming like unified by the Holy Spirit, and that idea of this like awareness of the good news, whether you choose to follow it or not. He ain't say make Christians, he said spread the good news. But like the idea of like this becoming globally known is like it makes sense when I think about that aspect of like how the kingdom of God is supposed to grow. I can see that connection between that type of growth and like multiplication or fruitfulness. Even like the idea of like birthing, like that kind of thing, like it makes sense. But it really makes me wonder on like a super deep level that I probably would not fully understand until I get to heaven. Like, why is that mechanism so important to the way God often works, if that makes sense.
Wow. I mean, I don't have an answer to that question you just dropped at the end. I just, I knew I wanted to speak, but then you asked that question. I'm not so sure anymore. But um, no, it just, to me, that points to the ingenuity of God, right? That he plants fundamental truths and concepts so deep ingrained into this fabric of our universe that these concepts can be transported into multiple different contexts. So I would have never even thought to apply that command to be fruitful and multiply into the command to make disciples, or into parenting, not just from a literally creating a person, but creating a person who knows God, like with the knowledge of God. That's that's good, Cameron. I'm glad you brought that up. Appreciate that.
Yeah, nah, the whole, of course, the multiplication word was struck a chord with me being a math guy. But and even like to the universality, if that's a word, I just made it up. If it's not, but the universal nature of like a lot of different things, like you said, Aaron, like just multiplication in itself. Like you think about school, like multiplication is like, okay, 2 times 2 is like 4, okay, but like maybe 1 times 50 is 50. That's a lot. That's a big difference than 1. That's a multiplication factor 50. You know what I mean? So I was in a teach team. I did this Bible study kind of teach team type thing with these with the pastors at my church, and every now and then they'll get like members of the church to come in and meet every Sunday for like a few months after church and just kind of talk through their like scriptures or talk through their sermon that they're preparing. And then there was this one conversation we were having, and I was talking to my pastor, and he was like describing God's power. He was like, I feel like people misinterpret, or like the image of God's power is frequently misconstrued. And so he starts describing it, and I was like, while he was describing it, I thought of gravity, because I'm always thinking about physics or something. And I thought about gravity. I was like, okay, so like gravity. And he said, yeah, like that's like a great image or whatever. And I ran that by Aaron, and we were talking about it. But God's power is like gravity. That things just like we're all susceptible to gravity. It's like if a plane's going to move, it's going to have to defy gravity. Like it's there. It's like omnipresent. Like as long as you're on Earth, you're going to be encountering gravity, and that's like God's will. So in the sense of like maybe like that methodology was specifically how he, you know what I'm saying? So when we learn it, when we get to know God, you get to know God better through interacting with other Christians. Like think about like the commandments, think about like the Great Commission, think about like the whole essence of, I think what is the shortest verse is like Jesus wept, and then the next one is like God is love. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we're so called to like love each other, and it's like we're also getting to know God, but getting to know each other and like live in our purpose. Like that's the whole, like he wants us to be. That's really interesting. I didn't finish any one of those thoughts, but I feel like y'all picked up on what I was saying.
I did pick up on it, and I had a thought, just because even going back to your gravity metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. Like gravity, you are always under the impression of gravity. Like even if you can't feel it, gravity is still pulling on you. Mm-hmm. It's just about your relation to other celestial bodies, right? Mm-hmm. And using that metaphor, the impact of gravity is also multiplied upon you or impressed upon you more the closer you are to one of those bodies. So I guess even as you're talking about digging, yeah. See, I told you. I'm glad you brought that up
Yeah,
because
yeah, 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 yeah. There we go.
like us digging in right now, right? Me being here in the presence of other believers and like just digging in and learning, expressing, or I'm sorry, exploring
Mhm.
some of the fundamental truths about the Word and God and life. Like that again, is pulling us closer to Christ together, pulling us closer together, and then pulling us closer to Christ at the center of it.
Yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
good one.
Go ahead.
And I think even listening to Phil, listening to your gravity example, it's interesting because on one end, it's like you thought of that idea of gravity as a really great like example or metaphor explanation or symbol of like the concept that your pastor was talking about when he was talking about the power of God. But not only is gravity like some just thing that you realized we can look at as an example, but like very well, it very well might actually be like in part for us being able to understand God's power. Like the reality that all things point to God. So when you start thinking of how these little things might just remind you of a concept that might like literally have also been God's intention. Like
Wow.
in
Yeah.
addition to the like functioning of like the earth system, like when y'all really think about it, the how gravity works in your life is how you can better understand my power. In
Wow.
addition to like you experiencing hopefully like joy and those kinds of things in a marriage if you get married, it also directly is like a like 1,000th, 1 millionth, whatever. But like perspective of what you're gonna experience with me in heaven and what you can begin to experience with me on this side of eternity. Like all these things are not only things that we can like intellectually connect, but they actually genuinely are connected.
Wow.
Which is interesting to think about. Just the ingenuity of God, like the fact that He's like the author of like all creativity and
That's
like
the word. That's the
intelligence.
word. That's
Like
the
it's just
word.
like
He's wild.
so,
Yeah. He really
um,
is very wild.
go ahead,
But,
Cam.
I was gonna say, I think it's interesting how, like Kim was saying, all these things point to God, right? And also when it comes to people, because we're all made in God's image, but we're all broken, we all have like a piece of God, right? And no piece is exactly the same. But I'm sure if you gather all together, we all point to God. We all be made in His image because of all those broken pieces are put together. And so I think it's interesting looking at like whether it's something that God created, like gravity, for example, or the people that He created. They all points back to Him, especially when we get everything together and look at it and say, "Oh wow, this is you. Oh wow, this is your power. Oh wow, only you can do this." It helps us appreciate it more, especially I know for me, like I think like Aaron said, being around other believers and just being able to receive more, right? Because you're around them. It's because those pieces are coming together. Like individually, it's just one piece of glass. Like, oh, okay, it's a piece of glass, whatever. But when you put it together, you start to see, oh, it's a vase. Oh, it shows a painting. Oh, it shows this. But as you start getting more pieces together, you start seeing the full image, start seeing fully what it is. And so it's like that with God, but not just with us, but also everything else. To where, okay, we're looking at God's people, we're looking at what God does, whether it's forces of nature or just the world He creates. You start to see the full picture of who God is because of what He's created. And no one thing can encapsulate all that God is because He's so great. But we can all have little pieces of it, whether it's me, you, Aaron, Cameron, the birds outside, the sky, whatever. If you take all of it and put it together, you start seeing the full picture of who God is and how God is. I think that was the intention.
wow. You know, in response to that, and also in response to what Cameron said, I think I'm gonna respond to Cameron's thing first before I forget it. Just going back again to this gravitational pull, right? Because for me, I even more than a symbol of God's power, I view that whole gravitational metaphor as a symbol of His will, right? And you know, we've been talking about like how we've been seeing ourselves as sheep and whatnot, reading Psalm 23, and you know, God, you know, as I was talking about the celestial bodies, man, God is that celestial body. He's the dense object that everything else in the universe is pulled towards. And so, as a child of God, as a sheep in His flock, that gives me great confidence to let go of trying to control events in my life, this and that, because it gives me great assurance to relinquish control over my life and know that, you know, as a sheep, you know, or a child of God, I may stray and I can't control the events in my life. But no matter how far it seems like I'm going off course, inevitably I'm going to course correct because that's how strong the will of God is. Not only in this world, but now that I'm a child of God, for me, the will of God for my life. It's always pulling towards the promises of God, the promises to work everything for my good, the promise um, to give me a hope and a future and to restore me and renew me and give me life, all those things. And that doesn't take anything of my doing. All it takes is me trusting in the will of the Father. And then the second thing I wanted to mention, because I just wanted to talk about Sam's topic, right? Because he was talking about vases and broken pieces and coming together from a picture. And I don't think we got enough time to talk about this time, but there's a concept called kitsugi. It's a Japanese concept that's all about, man. I know I always gotta go back to Japan, but man, this concept is a real beautiful metaphor that I would love to break down. I guess we'll have to do that next time, though. I know we're running out of time, but just remember, kitsugi. We don't have to talk about that.
Okay.
All right, Doug.
Yeah, and then I'll say some conclusive thoughts on both of their statements, which I am now losing. What was the thing that Cam said?
Once it comes out my mouth, it's gone. So
I
can't really.
Okay, so I'm the only one in here who actually listens. That's what I'm picking up.
No.
Cameron's talking about the gravity and how that's like God.
Anyway,
Cameron was talking about the power of God being like gravity. Man, y'all real trifling. So anyway, Cameron was talking about the power of God, and we were talking about like celestial body. Well, not I said celestial body, but she was talking about.
The crazy thing is,
what face was
Aaron
that?
is so quick. We not listening, but clearly he ain't. Maybe he was listening to something else. I don't know.
Here's the truth. I really had a lot. So the problem is, I had too much faith in myself. I thought that it was gonna come back to me, even though it hadn't come back to me when I made that statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like when you study for a test and the stuff you learn, you're never gonna see again, so you forget right after the test.
Right. Or like when something happens, you're like, wouldn't it be me though? And then it's like somebody really call you out. Or like when you're in class.
Could it be me?
I knew that answer. And teacher say and teacher call you up to the board, like, all right, what's up?
Every
you're
time.
Like, no, you see, I just
every time I'm out skating, I can't laugh at nobody. I've learned now I just can't laugh at anyone because I will immediately make the same mistake they make as I'm laughing. I'm at to start a whole different conversation now. We're about to wrap this one up. But anyway, I guess like just a general like a synopsis of things that I've gathered from this conversation, and I'd like to hear what y'all got from this conversation and new pieces of information you walked away from just putting our heads together. But the general, I guess the center of the conversation was the idea of succession, but the idea of leadership started to creep into my mind too. And I mean, there's obviously they're not one and the same, but they share components with each other. A significant portion of their components are similar. But think about leadership and the fact that so we were talking about succession and we were talking about like there is a hierarchical implication to succession or like fatherhood, all these different things we were talking about. But even on like a lateral scale and talking about how like we all like need each other in leadership, and like I feel like people think leadership it looks like one guy or one person being at the center of this like cohesive effort, or at least being at the head of this cohesive effort. But like leadership is just like influence over people around you. Like everyone can be a leader to some capacity, like teaching people things. And I suppose that's a part of the reason we started doing this podcast, not teaching, but just having like the influence that you inevitably will have on the next person, being conscientious of it, being intentional about it, and using it like resourcefully. So like while my pastor at my church used to always say this thing, and then my mom would just repeat him. It's like whoever has your ear has the keys to like your destiny, meaning like the people you're listening to, the information you're consuming is crafting your perception of life in the world around you. So it's like be conscious of who you surround yourself with, be conscious of like the music you consume, like film, all these different things. Oh, Cam, I remember now when she was talking about how God intentionally puts these things in to explain us, to explain to us His nature. And when she said that in reference to gravity, what I was going to say was one of the things that where I really not found God, but when I really started to like develop in my faith was through art itself. And so I remember like literature, and I'm not sure exactly how much of literature buffs y'all are, but Aaron and I, we talk a decent bit about literature. And I still got to read The Once a Future King. I'm still going to get my hands on that copy. I got to finish Dune first. I don't think I'm going to finish Dune right now.
Why? You literally said you were finishing it the other day.
I know, but because the same reason I didn't finish Freaks and Geeks, same reason I didn't finish like a lot of stuff. Because yeah, I left the last episode because I can always go back to it. Yeah. But anyway, I when it came to reading and literature, I was like very good authors. Every single sentence, every single word, every single letter is like very intentional. Like with the really good authors, you know what I mean? And so as I'm observing that, and then like visual, like conceptual art, or like movies, how people like try to portray these themes or these lessons and whatnot in these movies, and all these things. I'm on a tangent now, but anyway, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all. And Aaron, what was the word that you're gonna expound upon next time?
Yeah, kitsugi. Kitsugi. It's like the appreciation of broken things becoming more valuable actually after being broken.
Ooh.
Yeah. Y'all tune in for that one.
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Bet. Well, if you guys enjoyed what you saw, like, comment, even go as far as to subscribe. There's a B. And Cam, Sam, I'll let you guys give your outros before Aaron. Aaron, you can wrap it up at the end.
No, I was just saying we appreciate y'all coming over here and being on the podcast with us. We really appreciate y'all input.
For real.
No problem. What is our outro supposed to include?
Whatever you want to say before we take off.
Thank you.
Wow. We appreciate being invited. Yes, we appreciate being invited. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thanks for having us. It's been really cool. I'm gonna watch the episode myself, so looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to the next week episode. Kitsugi, you said? I'm looking forward to that. So, like I said, like, subscribe because some pretty good content here. God's moving, and that's all I got.
All right, appreciate you guys.
All right, cool.
All right, scatter.